Good morning or good lunch, everybody. Welcome to my session. I'm happy to be here. I see Matthias sitting here, so I will stick speaking English. No, stay. I don't know if there's anybody else who prefers English. I can speak Swedish as well, just to say that, even though I'm not Sweden. Actually, I'm Swedish since January this year, after 23 years living here in Stockholm. So finally made it. German originally. I work at Innovait, which is my own company, one-man show, working in the SAP industry, as most of you. I will give you some reflections today on what I think it means moving to public cloud, and also what application lifecycle has to do with this. Yeah, public cloud in the context of moving to S4, but also application lifecycle management moving to public cloud. To give you a little bit background on me as a person, an individual acting in this context, I have a history of around 20 plus years in SAP. Before that, in the last century, I also have an engineering background, crawling around in paper machines to start with. When I then joined an SAP template project at Stora Enso, at that time leading one of the work streams, as we would call it today. And during those years where we did a template development, we did pilots, then roll out to several countries in Europe, overseas, US, China, I never came across the terms ALM or Solman. Yeah? So we did all our ALM work, which of course was work that needed to be done with tools that we had decided up on our own, and SharePoint was one of them, still around today. Excel, the same, of course. Then I joined SAP and worked for 8-9 years here in SAP Sweden, but a lot also within the international teams within SAP and customers, of course, where one of the milestones was that I got involved in the ASAP development at that time, moving from 3 to 7 version of ASAP, which then evolved further into Activate, which we use today. Then in 2015, I decided, or I dared to leave, started my own business, and have been acting as a Solman and focus build coach in the past couple of years. And you see the customers that I have had since then, including SAP. In one of their projects here in Sweden, I was part of the SAP delivery team to help the PMOs, the implementation teams, and the customer IT organization to understand what you can do with Solution Manager, both in the delivery of the program, but also then as soon as you have had your first go live, how to deal with change and release management after that. So 2 S4 Greenfield projects in my backpack, 1 customer assignment where a conversion has taken place, where we have made extensive use of focus build. And in the meanwhile, the past 1.5 years, I've also had the opportunity to work with Cloud ALM hands-on, both on the operations perspective as well as using Cloud ALM for implementation to manage a Solman upgrade. Right? We were trying to learn what this tool is, how you can use it, and by that understand how a transformation with respect to ALM may happen over time. That said about me, I'd like to get to know you. Who is here from a customer, representing a customer of SAP? Okay. Who is a system implementation partner or a maintenance service provider vendor representative? Great, because I think what I talk about is dealing with those 2 groups, of course, and SAP itself as well. Yeah, because application lifecycle management is about IT and the business of IT, right? We talk about all these technical terms. We talk about rise and grow. And those are, of course, technical terms. They are contractual terms, service definitions. Yeah, we've seen that rise cannot be compared to rise. I think if different customers meet and they all say, yeah, we are on rise, there may be differences with respect to how they deal with what SAP does, what the customer has to do, what certain partners have to do. But in the end, it is about the business of IT, right? We need to get together and define how do we work together to deliver a transformation program. How do we make use of the systems that we have in whatever infrastructure they may be, yeah? And if they really are cloud, this thing changed compared to mine slides, was an oval, but we of course think in the end, having our systems on cloud is getting easier. We are a guy with a small balloon and our day-to-day work should be easy. We should be efficient and we should understand what's going on, what has to happen next, and what has happened, right? And when we then see that IT as a line of business has, of course, the same possibility to do a capability assessment, to think about what tools do we need to deploy for these capabilities, and how do we work with these tools in terms of business processes, we end up in, among others, talking about ALM, right? ALM circles around these three pillars in this picture, where we need to understand how do we get our people together, and then which tools do we use. Yeah? And for those of you, of course, today my session deals a little bit with this tool, which is a new tool from SAP, but there is, of course, Solution Manager as another SAP product still around, which targets the same area of business. And then, of course, there are a lot of non-SAP third-party tools that you can deploy to work in this area. And this little quote, maybe you know from some other anecdote, which I try to turn around into this when we quickly do a definition of ALM, right? ALM, this has also changed a little bit. I had just marked a little thing here. For me, ALM is about that we have different roles or resources that have different roles that need to collaborate. And then we have an end-to-end process. If we talk about IT as a line of business again, we have an end-to-end process where the IT resources come together to do planning and design, do governance of what we go forward with respect to development. We do development, testing, QA, we deploy, and then after it's live, we have to make sure it is maintained and improved, right? This is an end-to-end process in the same perspective as if we combine purchasing to sales to production to delivery and then get an invoice, right? IT has modular and end-to-end processes. And there, of course, ALM is the art of how, or make the teams define their wow. What is the wow effect of us using ALM tools, right? And let's do it as efficient as possible. And here I think we see that Solution Manager has been one tool provided by SAP, but it had to be managed completely by the customer, right? You have to configure it, you have to communicate about how it should be used and so on. But now with Cloud ALM, this is completely turning around because Cloud ALM comes as a public cloud solution, right? It is the real cloud solution. If we think about the S4 context, with RISE or GROW as contracts. Under GROW, you probably will be on the public cloud of S4. There is no other way. But if you are under RISE, you still may be on an IaaS. If you have HEC hosting your systems, it's an IaaS. Yeah, if it's private cloud edition, SAP hosts the system somewhere on hyperscaler, they manage it, but it's still not often full public cloud until you really know the public cloud, because you have other possibilities like cloud with respect to extensions, etc. On public cloud or ALM, the cloud ALM product, we do not have these possibilities. Cloud ALM is purely public, and you can do only extensions via APIs, but we'll come to that. So this is the launch pad of Cloud ALM, if you have all roles that you can have on the system. If we link it back to these three pillars, it's nicely structured into different blocks. And you can see this as a toolbox, right? We see and talk about the tool here. But where I would want to go and reflect upon is how to adopt this, how to make use of the Lego bricks you have into your organization that consists out of customer resources and vendor resources to then make sure you end up in efficient ALM processes. And there's a little bit of difference, of course, when we think about how we have done it with Solman and how we would do this with Cloud ALM as the underlying platform for IT delivery and IT operations, maybe. Who has been working with this hands-on? Anybody raising hands here? Nobody yet? Who of you have been using Solman? Focus Build. Ah, great, hands up. Then I think at least you can refer to a little bit what I'm talking about. Because this is, of course, very similar to what Solman can do. And one reason there is, of course, that SAP has to live and communicates already also that Solman has an end of life, which coincides with the business suite, right? Solman will only be around in standard maintenance until 2027 for the operations part, and will have an extended maintenance for those customers that still run ECC somewhere or have an enterprise support agreement up until 2030. So there's 7 years if you want to use Solman and Focus Build, and then you are on customer-specific maintenance if you need it afterwards. There's another interesting point to this. If you move your licenses from being on-premise licenses, which are related then to enterprise support contract, you move that whole package into a RISE contract, which is subscription-based, and you start your movement of your infrastructure onto the hyperscaler, you may end up in a situation where you have no usage rights for Solution Manager anymore as soon as all your landscape is on the hyperscaler, which is, of course, something to consider, that your Solman usage rights may end up earlier than 27 or 30. Yeah, so that's something to think about, also forward-looking as part of your S4 transformation. So let's go a little bit into the details. For Cloud ALM, some background information, and most of the pictures that I have here now in my deck come from most recent slide decks that were presented last month in Mannheim at the ALM Summit. There was this nice session of the lead engineer behind Cloud ALM, the internal development team lead, so to speak, that is responsible for Cloud ALM as a product. He presented this slide. I will not go through the details of it, but it's a fascinating story to understand that they do delivery of this tool in a completely different way than S4 is built and delivered, right? For S4 public cloud, we get 2 upgrades per year. Here in Cloud ALM context, we have new features being available every second week. which means what we saw in the keynote or heard in the keynote today, the change with which we as IT users are or having to deal with is, of course, faster. Things are coming every 2 weeks. Keep up to date what is coming. How does it influence us with respect to what we have already decided to use? But it is then maybe more minor adjustment. But we can keep up to track much, much faster. I had, for instance, during my usage of Cloud ALM, we had interactions with SAP, and within a few weeks, I had identified a need of improvement, I would say, maybe not a bug, but I had a wish, and 3 weeks later, they had shipped it. It was kind of great. And we, of course, never, ever have to think about we need to run a Cloud ALM upgrade. Solman upgrade takes maybe 2 months. First the dev system, then the prod system, need some planning around this. So never, ever again, right? And that is something which may be attractive if you're now a newcomer to S4. Let's say you're a greenfield, go public cloud or private cloud, and then you think, should we also learn to deal with the Solman part? Maybe Cloud ALM is not fully ready, but let's try to do it. Live with the workarounds until the features are there that we need. Maybe we can plan around it. Requesting new features is already available, and they get handled in a different way than the improvements that were done on Solman. So here's a much faster turnaround as well. You can go here and read up about how SAP deals with this. And then, of course, as part of this, we get a map of APIs connected or available on Cloud ALM, so that in the case your own definition of ALM processes needs to pay attention to external tools that you use. For instance, many companies, they of course have an ITSM tool globally, may it be ServiceNow or Jira, and they will stick to that. So we have to build out some integrations, and therefore Cloud ALM is always kind of developed with a focus on APIs as well. So when it comes to this area of operations, what I have been allowed to do together with my customer here, some representatives in the room as well, we have had an S4 go live greenfield, been doing releases there with focus build, Solman in use, but as the systems were hosted on HEC, they were not really monitored yet. So as soon as we then, after the first or second release go live, started to talk about what would we need with respect to monitoring, we very quickly decided, let's go in Cloud ALM. Do not spend time on Solman and evaluate how it can be used for monitoring, but let's go onto this train and let's say learn and grow with while Cloud ALM is growing. Yeah, so we there started to using job monitoring, integration exception monitoring. We had, of course, some kind of a glimpse into health monitoring as well, even though most of that is under HEC responsibility. Did the setup for the productive S4 system, productive Solman system, and made our way from there to define for which artifacts we wanted which events to happen, and then also, of course, how to integrate that into the delivery with the service provider. Yeah? The IT organization and the AMS service provider, of course, had to define their way of working. How do we work with alerts? How do we work with Jira as the ITSM tool, where the time reporting happens of the service provider's resources? How do we get this together, again, as an end-to-end process with respect to monitoring, ITSM, solving the ticket, and then going on until the next case happens. So, as I have here some statements, it's a smörgåsbord to pick from, a buffet to pick from. You don't have to do all in once. You can pick and start small. There's also no transition planned. So if you do some stuff on Solman with respect to monitoring in your legacy landscape, you have to start from scratch. But it's also a good opportunity to lean back and reflect upon what do we do in legacy? Do we need to monitor really everything? Have we ever gotten an alert for something? And what is the value versus the risk if we don't monitor this, if it is not available on Cloud ALM? Yeah? It may become later available, but even if it's not coming, what is the risk actually? Why did we set this up if we never ever got an alert? Right? Maybe we are safe on that side. So I think thinking fresh and taking the ALM process with respect to collaboration between what do we want to monitor, who is dealing and acting with these things, how do we bring this kind of into our own day-to-day work life. Also, of course, there are these two kind of, let's say, not really conflicting, but interacting controversies that as Cloud ALM is a public cloud solution, of course, every customer gets it for free as part of their entitlement running other SAP products. The question is, what expectations will customers develop upon partners, right? When I make a new contract with a service provider, I might go and ask, okay, how will you do these monitoring services? What do we need to pay for and why? Yeah, if they deploy their own systems, maybe much more expensive services than if they would use Cloud ALM as a platform. And the same way from the other side, of course, partners need to reflect upon, here is a tool that is for free for all my customers. It's even free for me internally because many of them, of course, may have SAP subscriptions themselves. How do we bring this tool into our own operations, into our own production process of producing and delivering services? Yeah. Finding the driver is another point here. Who should drive such an initiative? Should it be driven by the partner or should it be driven by the customer? Yeah, we ended up doing this together. It was kind of an approach taken by the ALM team within the customer, but we cannot do it alone because the service provider is involved and has a contractual responsibility for doing monitoring and acting upon alerts. So there we took it together, right? But in your context, maybe it's taken up by a service provider. We would go for this now, dear customer, right? For the implementation side, we see a similar kind of end-to-end process that we know from Focus Build, right? We do process management, we will do documentation, we have project and task management. We then do our project execution and follow-up. We do testing and the deployment in terms of a release. And where we dealt with solution manager and best practice utilization in Focus Build, earlier on, we had to do manual work on our own to get best practices loaded into solution manager. All of that is falling away when you go for Cloud ALM, right? Both the Activate methodology is contained in it, best practices are contained in it, which makes it much easier to consume. And also, as it is one central tool where the content is managed by SAP, updates are made available regularly, right? If the Activate methodology is renewed as part of a new S4 release, and again, these S4 releases come twice a year now, so Activate follows along, you will see these contents available in your Cloud ALM, and you can choose if you want to adopt new content into your ongoing delivery or not. Yeah. Also, I have it here, Focus Build goes Cloud ALM. Previously, and it's still communicated in that way, of course, is that Cloud ALM is not a successor of Solution Manager. It's an additional offering, how they phrase it. But, of course, they need to take care of that customers that use Solman and Focus Build can transition into Cloud ALM. And therefore, also the term Focus Build is coming up as a term in the context of Cloud ALM. I think they will not call it Focus Build in the end, but of course you bring comparisons. what can we do in focus build, what can we not do yet in Cloud ALM. Yeah, and they are working towards that. Increased flexibility in terms of that all these little blocks in Cloud ALM for implementation can be used on their own. Yeah, so if you want to start with requirements, you can just collect requirements and just have them there. Don't need to go forward with it. You can use a feature, connect a transport, and move transports in the landscape. You don't have to use user stories requirements if you don't want to. You can start small and then make up your way to getting a more and more sophisticated end-to-end process in place. What also will come over time until mid next year, as I heard, is that as we have best practices for S4 in Cloud ALM, SAP plans to also produce a best practice package for Cloud ALM for implementation. So you can go pick processes for requirements management, yeah, for using features. You can look at those, you can do fit to standard workshops, how to use Cloud ALM using a set of best practices for Cloud ALM, which may be just in time for some of the customers. Some other customers that need to start now, they may need to start understanding this on their own, and then maybe in a half a year, once this package comes available, we can look at what have we created, how would SAP go about this, and move it back to standard. I think in Cloud ALM, in the first place, you would not go directly for building a lot of extensions, but the possibility is there as we have all these APIs. Yeah, but I think learning the tool first before you really put on top of it is a first step. Yeah, in my engagements where we've been doing work with Solution Manager, very, very rarely I have done RISEF on Solman. Yeah, we've used the tool as it came to not end up in technical debt on that end as well. What I felt when we had using this tool for our Solman upgrade, the task management feature is really great. Yeah, you can plan the project, you have all your WBS items, you can assign it to the resources that are in the team, can work with it regularly, daily. You decide upon something that should be done, put it in as a task, you can follow up upon it. It's really great. Yeah. And of course, over time, mid next year is the current kind of timeline communicated. The transition package that SAP is working upon, if you want to migrate or move content from Solman to start working with Cloud ALM, will be put in place. Time is running. Even here, customer expectation, partner differentiation is a big topic, I feel, because this will, of course, influence a lot of S4 transformation programs. The discussion needs to come up if Solman or Cloud ALM will be used, right? Or also when the transition needs to happen. Due to time, I think this we will skip fast. There's a third leg on the service delivery. If you have been using the engagement and service delivery work center on Solman, there is nowadays a possibility to consume SAP services on Cloud ALM, quite new. And also a long-term item on the roadmap is, of course, the backbone integration. If tickets to SAP need to be channeled through an ALM tool. But this is just a preview, there is nothing kind of in place yet. And then the fourth leg in this tool is about how to transition or which tools to use if you do kind of a blue field. If you want to move certain ECC setup and data into a greenfield system. Yeah. From both of these areas, so far I have no yet experience, therefore no personal reflections on that end to communicate. But the final sum up actually is that I think independently if customers end up under Grow or under Rise, there will of course be the need to define how will extensions be delivered, how will the governance be put in place around when extensions are allowed to be pushed forward. Yeah, like I said before, in this planning and governance part of this end-to-end process, if you nail that procedure for you, then I think you're in a good position with respect to an ALM strategy upon which you then can execute with the tool set that you decide to use. I think the picture says more than the words. I guess that Cloud ALM, if I'm here in 5 years, we'll probably see a completely different picture. Can talk about stories using Cloud ALM, where we are now with respect to the usage of focus build, I would say. So with that said, thanks for listening. This last slide gives you some links to where you might want to go and continue your journey with respect to talking about ALM at home internally. And if you want to talk more ALM, today at 3 o'clock, it's unfortunately starting in parallel with other sessions, but we have a focus group from SAPSA, ALM focus group. It's me and Christer, who will be the hosts there. We have planned an hour in one of the rooms on the other side of the corridor, where we just right now without agenda informally meet up to talk ALM, whatever questions you may have. I have a lot of slide decks with me from Mannheim, which we can pull up if we end up in any topics that might be of interest to the community. Great. Thanks for your attendance. Any questions now? Yes. In S4 context, 3, and before that, 4th, which has implemented focus build for major release delivery. Not a full-blown focus build, but just for, like, use it on the project track. So I've been at Volvo Cars, at Coop Sweden, SCA, and Coromant, like I saw in the picture. Yeah. Yeah. I would say this is, if you push in an S4 system into a business organization, it's a rocky ride. Yeah, you need to focus on change management, on training, communication, stakeholder management. It's the same journey that we talk on IT whenever we see transformation programs fail. It's heavy reason is often change management. Yeah, if you get a sponsorship around your focus build engagement and get your partners driving it with you, then I think you are better set for success than if you just say, IT will just use it, right? I mean, we have colleagues here, you can have a chat with them. I'm happy to connect you. Yeah. Mm. That's a good question. The planning of the transition will be work for the IT organization in the coming years. Yes, we can start painting certain paths, I would say. But as I said, the real clear picture with respect to all content that can be moved or should be moved will be available mid next year. Not saying that we cannot start talking about it. I would also say that certain products you may be able to start using Cloud ALM for already, right? If you have a SuccessFactors scope, you could decide, okay, why, if we don't do a lot on that in Solman, why shouldn't we start exploring Cloud ALM to get some understanding, which then can feed into a strategy of how to use Cloud ALM in an S4 context. Yeah. For those of you being interested, one thing which they now communicate is, for instance, the dual landscape support will be coming in Cloud ALM, but the DGP, the CSOL stuff, all of that is only needed in on-premise or private cloud landscape situations. So the plan they have is that they move these features, which are today in Solman centrally, they will move that in the STAPI add-on component. Yeah, so all of that stuff which you need for on-premise landscapes will be in that add-on, which of course also means that you need to have a strategy to have that add-on up to date regularly, because Cloud ALM pushes every 2 weeks new features. If you're on your managed system on a lower version of that component, you cannot consume these new features, right? So it's internal IT dealing with this, which you need to sync up. And if you wouldn't be on an on-premise or private cloud landscape where you have to deal with it, or it is in your RISE contract that SAP keeps your systems up to date, whenever there's a new STPI, it has to be there. Yeah, that's what I said. RISE contracts may look different. Yeah. On HEC, we always had to order it ourselves. And then these updates on the managed system track, they were delayed to what capabilities we could use. Yeah. Further questions? We have a long lunch also, yeah? Or just think about what you hear today and come to our other slot at 3. You're welcome.